Hey guys, I think I'm like a minute early. Unexpected, huh? Well, I got a guest. I do my best to be right on time, a little bit early for my guests. I'm not quite always successful. Mercy, thank you so much, my friend. Mercy has re-upped. Always nice to see that. Selma, nice to see you. Sniper says, thank you, Mercy, for your support to Yogi. Absolutely. I'm okay, Selma. Kat says hi to Yogi. That's me. Give me a second. So we are waiting for a special guest. Every guest is special. Um, but this one, very unique in what we've done. You know, I've had quite a few Course in Miracles teachers, students come up, and we've had James Plath, the mystic, as well as uh, Tom Thompson, a yogi, Tim Freak, a philosopher. We've had some people come up. We've talked about recovery. I got more people next week. We'll be talking about recovery and A Course in Miracles, how they play into each other. For some, it's been the only path that has actually worked, that they've actually been able to stick with. Um, but Bruce is a long time student of A Course in Miracles. I believe he started practicing in the 80s. But it was when he met Gary Renard that I believe that things began to take off. Hey, John. So we're just waiting for when Bruce is ready, if he wants to hop in, and I'll give him an introduction when he's here. I'll let him give the introduction. I shouldn't make a guest do all the work, but I'm going to. I'm glad you're happy today, Selma. Um, hey, Howling. Howling says, so to all who said hello. Thank you. Um, so as we are saying, we've had quite a, we've had some diverse, but mainly it's been, yogis, Course in Miracles students. Even the philosophers have been steeped in the non-dual tradition. But hey, Lucy. But Bruce, again, Bruce is bringing something unique. He is tying the seven Hermetic principles with sacred geometry. Well, sacred geometry and the seven Hermetic principles, I think, are an easy thing relatively to bridge. But bridging that into the deep non-dual tradition of A Course in Miracles, um, I'm really looking forward to hearing how he does that. So we're just going to sit here and wait. Hopefully, there will be no technical difficulties. You know what happens. For me, quite a bit. Everyone is saying hi. Hey, Adam. All right. Bruce sent me a message. Just a few more minutes, guys. He was going to use his laptop. Laptops don't work on live streams, so he's gonna go with his iPad. Hey, Lady Sky. Cat says, do moments like this give you a little bit of anxiety, Yogi? Yes, they do give me a little bit of anxiety. They do. But you know what? I look at the people. I look at you, Cat. I look at Lady Sky. I look at our friend Selma, Sniper, Adam, Hollering, Lucy. Everything's better. Give me 1 second, guys. We're getting there. We're getting closer. Talk amongst yourselves. A few more minutes, guys. Be patient. And here he is, guys.
Hey,
Bruce.
hi, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm so used to using Zoom, and I apologize for the delay that it's like, oh, I got that iPad that mostly
Not a
sits
problem.
collecting dust. Yeah.
Everyone who visits me is used to my technical difficulties.
Oh.
So I have a little routine. I do some tap dancing, I do some miming. Uh,
Well, I appreciate your patience immensely. So, yeah, like I say, I was cutting it a little too close, and I thought, oh, I have a good couple minutes. I can get on to Zoom, and then I realized, oh, it's not Zoom. Oh, whoops. Oh, well. Anyway,
um,
thank you for inviting me. First and
Thank you
foremost.
for.
Yeah,
I've mentioned this to some other Course Miracle teachers,
yeah,
student guests that I've had.
yeah,
The wholehearted warmth and sincerity of their yes, I would love to come on,
yeah.
and I appreciate that so much
Oh,
from
well,
you.
it's so mutual, yeah, to be welcomed, and yeah, and I think that's the whole spirit of our real identity and our real nature, isn't it? To realize that that no matter what the form, our real identity is the same, and we really share the same ultimate interest, which is waking up from our dream of separation, right?
Ultimately, the same goal.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, So much to talk about. You're the first guest where I don't know where to dive in.
Oh, well,
Um,
that's fine.
I because you're so diverse, but you're able to bring it all together. And the one goal that you were just talking about, how you bring sacred geometry, how you bring the seven hermetic laws, how you tie it all into that non-dual tradition of A Course in Miracles.
Oh, thanks, thanks. Yeah, yeah. I guess to preface a little bit of my background without dwelling unnecessarily on that. When I was a teenager, I kind of became interested in metaphysics because my mom she had this experience. I probably told this few dozen times in different places that she was when she was a teenager. She visited her grandmother's beach house on Catalina Island off the coast of California, and she saw a fleet of things that were moving really fast, and they made an abrupt right angle turn and disappeared. And she said if she was hallucinating, um, it was a mass hallucination because all of the heads on the beach were kind of tracking, these things moving very fast, and they all kind of looked at each other, shrugged their shoulders, and said, but she it kind of stuck with her, and she thought, well, what was that? And so when the occasional things surfaced in the news about UFOs, she kind of got into that, and then it kind of led to inquiry about psychic phenomena and the whole mental realm, new agey stuff, metaphysics, and she started amassing a metaphysical library that eventually spanned a couple of bedrooms and spilled over into the living and dining rooms of her house in Northern California.
So how did your mom get Greg Braden in her living room?
Well, you have good. You've done your homework. Well, basically, when Greg was just kind of getting started with his public speaking, he needed an audience, and my mom and a handful of other people in the San Francisco Bay Area in Northern California started this group called New Frontiers. And New Frontiers, their mission was to have interesting speakers with something useful and informative to share. And Greg was one of their first speakers. And then my wife, Nancy, and I cloned that organization when we were in the foothills east of Sacramento, and we had New Frontiers of the Gold Country. And so we did the same thing. In fact, our group lasted a few years longer and overlapped the duration of the Bay Area group. And we had Greg as our first speaker. And then he was one of the later speakers, and then I closed out the 9-year series talking about sacred geometry. So that's kind of how it came about. And we ended up going with Greg and his partner at the time, along with there was 21 of us, which is a Fibonacci number. all those little trivial details. Anyway, that went to Egypt in the fall of '92. And we got to explore all the Ptolemaic temples up and down the Nile River, and lots of fascinating things. The Cairo Museum, which is a highlight, and then the Great Pyramid at the last day or two of the trip. And I'd been fascinated with that after having read a book by Peter Tompkins called Secrets of the Great Pyramid, in which he talks about the golden ratio and the sacred proportion and divine proportion. They're all the same thing, but basically a mathematical constant that symbolically represents the idea that we're all interconnected. And to me, I was fascinated with that idea that the interconnectedness of things could be symbolized or represented in a fashion by a numerical ratio, and the ratio is one where the if you divide a line in two parts, I'll try to do this with my fingers, and you have let's see if I get back from the camera a little bit. Kind of roughly, if you have a small part and a large part of a divided line, and you divide it in such a way that the ratio of the whole to the large part is the same as the large part to the smaller part, that's what's known as the golden ratio. And you can plug that into a mathematical formula, the quadratic formula, actually, if you remember that from your high school algebra class. And if you plug the numbers in, you get 1 plus the square root of 5 over 2, or its inverse, which is 1.618, and then a whole bunch of digits like 03, 1.618, I think is what it goes. And then the inverse of that is 0.618. anyway, the math is kind of interesting, but to me, the important part of it was the principle that we're all interconnected. And I thought, well, that's the idea that everything is related to everything else. Well, that's kind of like the sameness is kind of like a gateway idea to oneness, which is really, I think, the ultimate spiritual premise is that there's one thing, and we are having a dream or a hallucination or a movie or whatever metaphor you like about being separate and being individuals, and that's a pretty challenging idea because we're so inured. That's a word that I came across a couple of years ago. A fancy 5-letter word. The word inure means to be so steeped and immersed in something that you don't even realize that you're swimming in it, kind of thing.
Right.
So we're inured in the idea of duality or separation, and we don't even question that foundational premise for the most part. Um,
Has this helped you clear up the symbols, the symbolism? Uh,
yeah, I think so. I think so. Yeah, I put a few books together. The first one is called Sacred Geometry Design Source Book, and that has like 1,300 images of things that a lot of them are based on the golden ratio. Another shape that shows up a lot is the Vesica Pisces, which is like two overlapping circles, and the area between those two circles that's in common, or again the shared identity, if you will, is as a representation of the shared vision, and of course that intersection is like the shape of an eye, or the stomata of the leaf of plants, where the transpiration between the inner and the outer seems to occur. um, all those kinds of things symbolically representing interrelationship, interconnectedness, interchange, but ultimately the connection and our connection to each other and to our source, um, to me is foundational. So, and then the second book that I put together, the Geometry Code, basically takes some of those geometric metaphors and archetypes and shows how, just like anything else, it doesn't. Geometry is just one particular discipline that you can apply this to. But since I was familiar with that, I thought, well, there's I um, picked out about a dozen geometric symbols, and then use those as a way of describing how you can either use geometry to further our belief in separation and duality, or you can use it to undo it, if that makes sense.
it does make sense, and that's
Yeah.
very important because I think a lot of times we do. I like to use the expression "shiny objects."
Yeah. Yeah.
We get very
Yeah.
distracted, and we love chasing shiny
Oh,
objects.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Sure. Yeah. I think we've all done that. And yeah. And using that, the more general metaphor of that, just anything in the world that we think is going to make us happy is our own personal set of collection of shiny objects, right?
Right. And
Yeah.
ultimately,
Yeah.
um, I think we all know ultimately, um, they generally leave us feeling uh, unsatisfied,
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
which
That
is
that all.
actually sort of wonderful in the end.
It is. That's a great point. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because yeah, that divine dissatisfaction is really the foundation upon which we can make a correction. And the correction, shifting gears now over toward the non-dual metaphysics of A Course in Miracles, that willingness to see that doing it on our own hasn't worked. I mean, we're steeped in a culture. I mean, I grew up with one of the main actors in at least the westerns that I saw as a kid was John Wayne, and his sort of ethic was I can do it myself, and there's that sort of the pioneering, independent, almost a an unchallenged assumption in the American psyche, one might say, that the I can do it myself idea. There's nothing wrong with that intrinsically, other than we oftentimes use it as a way to avoid the help that we intuitively, I think, know can really help us, and to avoid the collaboration, not necessarily with something external, but collaborating with the part of our mind that really does know the way out of the quagmire that we've made, if that makes
So
sense. Yeah.
it does, and the symbols are pointing to that inner reality. So
Yeah.
instead of
Yeah.
getting
Yeah.
lost
Yeah. Yeah.
in chasing the outer, we
Right.
realize that the symbols are symbols of the mind.
Right. And the symbols in them of themselves are not important. It's basically what thought system we're using to look at them with. And that's true of just about anything. Yeah.
You open your book with that, actually, the two thought systems.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, could you touch upon that a little bit?
Oh, you bet, you bet. Yeah, and one of the premises of any good non-dual teaching, of which I think A Course in Miracles is a stellar example, and I'm not really familiar with that many others. I know of Advaita Vedanta, and there's uh, someone just mentioned this morning a branch of yoga that is that kind of higher teaching of the non-dual awareness. But you know, good non-dual teaching will basically start with the idea that there's really two aspects of everyone's mind, and there's a part of us that wants and yearns and longs to be restored to that awareness of oneness, which ironically we've never really left, but we believe we have. And then the other part of it that is typically called ego that fights it tooth and nail and is sometimes extremely clever. In fact, fairly frequently, often is downright sneaky in terms of sabotaging every effort that we make honestly to try to undo our belief in separation.
So
And
we could see the same symbol,
yeah, exactly,
and
exactly. Yes,
depending on the teacher,
yes.
it's going to be so different.
Exactly. You nailed it. You nailed it. That's it. Yeah. And so it's not the symbol that's important, in the same way that I think it wasn't a Buddhist metaphor of, you know, we see the finger pointing to the moon and we worship the finger instead of what it's pointing to.
Right.
I always like that one,
I
but
did too.
yeah, but it's like, well, it's not it's not the object, it's really the idea behind it. And so symbols are only helpful in the sense that they represent something more important. And so every we're all symbols, you know, thinking of your life and my life as symbols, then we can say, well, what does this life represent? Well, if I'm looking at it from through the eyes of what the Course would call Holy Spirit, or the Jesus, which is not a religious or a historical version, but a metaphysical version, if you will, um, is really any ego-free presence that is willing to patiently, gently, and inexorably lead us out of that insanity of duality. Um, yeah.
I'm glad you brought up Jesus as a symbol.
Hmm.
Uh, Jesus is a symbol of the right mind
Yeah, yeah,
versus the historical Jesus that
right,
comes
right.
with a whole lot of baggage.
Bingo, bingo. Yeah, and that was true for me too. When I was a teenager, and among those many books in my mom's metaphysical library, and including lots of things on relics like the Great Pyramid, there was the three blue books at the time. That was the initial form of the published version of A Course in Miracles, and I flipped through it back in the late '70s. I thought, well, might be interesting, but it seems like there's a lot of religious jargon in there. And so I just kind of, dismissed it. It's like, oh, I don't know, maybe not. And then I moved from the Bay Area to the foothills east of Sacramento and Grass Valley area. And I just started working in a high tech company called Grass Valley Group, still around. And and then there were people in the community that I met that were studying this thing called A Course in Miracles. Well, wait, I think I know. I think I've heard of that. So I asked my mom if I could borrow those three books, um, and with new eyes, I thought, well, maybe I could kind of look past the things I had, the religious baggage that I was still wrangling with, and maybe there's something more to it. And then when I quickly realized when I opened up the first page and read, "Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God." And I thought, that doesn't sound like the religion I remember.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
When was it that it clicked for you? Because I know I read in your introduction, um, you read the course, but it uh, didn't become your teaching, your main focus until, was it Gary Renard?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow, you really studied up. Thanks. Yeah, saves me a lot of backtracking. But yeah, in 2007, really in '84 I started reading the course, and I never really set it down, but it became yeah, a little bit more back burner from there until 2007, after a few years of moderate study and exploration. But I was working part time and also volunteering part time at the Rogue Valley Metaphysical Library in Ashland, Oregon, and they had a huge library, even bigger than my mom's. Surprise, surprise. And among the books there was Disappearance of the Universe by Gary Renard. And uh, I found that book, I think on the same day that I had uh, decided to go to see a movie called Living Luminaries. And there in that documentary, there were people like Eckhart Tolle, who I was familiar with, and I enjoyed his work, and Don Miguel Ruiz, who I had interviewed actually on a community radio station in Northern California, KVMR FM. Shout out to them, and that I did a little substitute DJ work with years ago, and several other people that I really respected and appreciated. But there was this one person that really struck my curiosity, named Gary Renard, and so I uh, I went to house sit for a friend of mine in Southern Oregon, not far from there, who was in Hawaii for a week, and I said, "Oh, sure, I'll be happy to do that. It's closer to where most of my client work was at the time." So I parked myself down on the sofa and looked over and it's like, there's two books by Gary Renard. What a coincidence! So I picked up Disappearance of the Universe, and he, it just kind of knocked my socks off, and I realized I got to go back and reread the course. And one of the things that Gary's teachers, Arten and Persa, suggest is that there's over 600 corrections to the biblical religious stories that a lot of us in the Western Hemisphere and Western world have grown up with. That if we don't have that correction, we're probably going to have some baggage or misgivings about doing anything that even sounds kind of like that. And I was certainly in that camp for a good while. So that basically really helped me kind of. That was a big jump start for me to
Me
get
too.
back into the course. Yeah.
I started the course in the mid 90s,
Uh huh. Yeah.
um, and continuously put it aside
Uh huh.
uh, over and over again. I mentioned a story the other day in the very early 2000s. I used to go to Self Realization Fellowship
Oh,
here in
okay.
Maryland.
Oh,
Um,
nice, nice. Yeah.
and one of the people that I would go there with, we were having coffee together,
Uh huh.
and he said, "So, what is it? What's our path? What's the path to awakening ultimately
Uh huh.
for you and I? Is it Paramahansa Yogananda? Is it Buddhism?" And without hesitation and without having finished the course, I said, "Course of Miracles will take us all the way, or it'll take me at least all the way there."
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that seemed to be a key event for me to dive back in. But it wasn't until the disappearance of the universe where everything clicked and it
Yeah. Yeah.
made sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then started reading more Kenneth Wapnick, as I saw that you did as
Yes.
well.
And continue to do so to this day. Yeah. Ever more
Um,
so.
so how do you tie two things? I really um, we went in with the symbols, uh, the seven hermetic laws.
Uh huh. Uh huh.
Um, do they tie into the course?
I think in some ways they do. I consider that second book, the Geometry Code, which is a long subtitle. A little quick story about that.
I mentioned that. I mentioned
Yeah.
that, by the way.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. One of the things that I thought was kind of amusing was I had a subtitle that had the phrase "forgiving the dream of separation." And I thought, well, yeah, there's something like that. And then I realized, no, the dream doesn't need to be forgiven. I need to forgive the dreamer. And that one change to that word from dream to dreamer was like, now it fits. Now it works. Because basically that gets it back to the mind, because the dream seems to be out in the world. It's still really in the mind, but I need to get back to the causative factor, which is my choice for teacher, my choice for thought system.
It's so
And
important.
it is, it really is. Yeah. And it's challenging to remember that, because we've taught ourselves so many things that are what I consider horizontal distractions. And it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with anything in the world. It's just that there's nothing in the world that's going to make us happy. But the course, a short term for A Course in Miracles, just the course, uses a vertical metaphor for when I'm looking above the battleground or above the ego's plane of duality, so to speak, of comparing lots of things in space and time, and certainly all the things that I can't encounter in my everyday life, and want to make big deals out of things that I think are good or bad or desirable and undesirable. If I'm focused on trying to manipulate all those things on that level, thinking that's going to make me happy, I've kind of got the cart before the horse. But if I can go above the battleground and just look and see what I'm doing with my mind, and still do the same things I'd probably be doing anything anyway, but do it looking at that and seeing it as like a movie or a play or a dream, like a virtual reality, if you will, like a very sophisticated AI generated hologram, um, that we assume is reality. Then I can begin to smile at it a little bit. Not always, but just not even externally necessarily, but just a little inward grin or smile that says, "Oh yeah, I'm dreaming. I need to remember that I'm dreaming," and that's really
I
important. Yeah.
mentioned that today that no one even has to know that you're going about your life forgiving.
Right.
Uh,
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
you never
It's an
have
inner
to ever
process.
say to someone, "I forgive you,"
Right. 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 Yeah.
because generally they'll say, "For what? I didn't do anything."
Exactly. And they're right because nobody really has done anything in truth. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, generally, I wait until like near the end before I see if you want to answer any questions. But this seems like an important question, and
Oh,
it's
please
on
do.
the subject
Sure.
from
Sure.
Heart
Sure.
Matters.
Uh-huh.
What benefit do we get from waking from the dream?
Well, the benefit we get is we're more peaceful, and I think that's a gradual process. It's not like suddenly, okay, I've done this weekend workshop, I now understand everything there is to know about A Course in Miracles, and 3 days later, I'm completely peaceful. Going forward, just like just a sudden quantum thing. It's really there's a lot of little jumps. Um, that it is sort of quantum in like a microscopic sense is kind of how I like to think of it. I did one of my blog posts on ACI blog showing like a diagram of the when you average it out, it's sort of like a gradual ramping, um, phasing out of the ego and phasing into Holy Spirit's correction. Um, but the overall accomplishment, if you will, is that, or the restoration is probably a better word, is that we become more peaceful because we're not identified with an insane version of ourselves that we made up.
Which is the ego.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Um, could you? I, that's a perfect definition for the ego, but very often people get um, there's an affront saying, the ego is not what you want. The ego is not the teacher that you want, and that you are not the ego.
Uh-huh.
And uh, there can always be the sort of a backlash of
Right.
do you
Right.
have a working definition of one, the ego, and two, why don't you want to choose the ego as your teacher?
Why would we choose the ego as a teacher?
Why
Well,
wouldn't we want to?
oh, why wouldn't we want to? Yeah, that's yeah, well, yeah. The ego is actually defined. In fact, I could probably find it online real quick. There's a web edition of the course that's, if you go to
Yep.
acim.org/acim, the entire course is on there. And in the manual for teachers, there's a section called "What is the Ego?" And it really, um, let's see, where is it? It's actually in both the workbook and the manual. Only the one I was thinking of is in the workbook, and it's what is the ego is this little 5 paragraph um, essay that is brilliant. Let's see if I can find a sentence or two that will fit. The ego, here we go. The ego is idolatry, meaning something that we put in as a substitute for what we really want. The sign of limited and separated self, born in a body, doomed to suffer and to end its life in death. It is the quote will unquote that sees the will of God as enemy and takes a form in which it is denied. The ego is the quote proof unquote that strength is weak and love is fearful, life is really death, and what opposes God alone is true. Well, there's a pretty good definition right there of how insane everyone's ego is. It's not just my ego or your ego. Everyone's ego is completely insane. But fortunately, we all have the correction that completely and happily eventually will undo that, because we will get so we will be so done with the ego that we will just say, "They'll time out, ego. Okay, I'm done. I'm completely done with you at some point." But usually, it's done in little jumps, little steps, where if you add them all together gradually, I think it's a more comfortable pace. I think that is
Right.
probably more typical for our usual path. That
So
we
the correct mind, Holy Spirit,
uh-huh.
or the symbol of Jesus, the Holy Spirit is a symbol as well, but a useful,
Yes.
but a
E-
useful
Exactly.
symbol.
Yeah, yeah. And it's just a correction. It's just a correction. It's not really anything substantive in itself. It's basically just the undo principle, if you will. So the ego is the premise that I did something that's counter to perfect oneness, that destroyed the unity of all creation, even though it's mostly out of our conscious awareness. But there's that undercurrent in our mind, that if anything that we're just a little bit uneasy about, in the last chapter in the text of the course, it says, we go through this life uncertain, lonely, and in constant fear. And those are pretty good, three pretty good definitions of the ego thought system. Uncertainty, meaning we don't know, and we don't want to admit we don't know. Lonely, well, what could be a better demonstration of isolation and loneliness than thinking that we're stuck in a body that really has a challenging time relating just to the handful of bodies that we come in contact on an everyday basis, and trying to get along in any kind of reasonable fashion, and constant fear. Well, if we think that we're apart from the rest of the universe, then almost by definition, we're at odds with everything else that is not us. It's a built-in we they polarization. And so the polarities that we see reflected in our world and our news and social media is not the cause. It's just a reflection of our choice for choosing a polarizing thought system, which the ego
Right.
is. Yeah.
And that's important to consider, that
Yeah.
of why we choose the Holy Spirit, because look around the world. Do you
Exactly.
like it? Th-
Exactly. Exactly.
There's
Yeah.
there's beautiful things, there's beautiful symbols.
Right. Right.
There's trees,
Yeah.
there's otters and beavers, there is sunsets,
Right.
but there's also warfare, there's starving
Right.
children,
Right.
there's
Right.
crime, political discord. Um, and I think eventually, hopefully, we look around and think, is this the world that I want?
Right.
And we have an option,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
we can't keep rearranging, the metaphor of um, chairs on the deck of the Titanic. We can't keep rearranging the chairs. It's
Yeah.
going to sink no matter what we do out there.
Exactly, exactly. And it's not a pessimistic worldview at all. It's basically saying, if I realize that I'm hallucinating, or I'm dreaming, or I'm in a movie, I don't have to go up to the screen in the movie theater and take my collection of paints and brushes and try to paint over what I'm seeing on the screen. That's kind of a crazy approach. But if I go to the projection booth and change what's going through the projector, that could make a difference. And metaphorically, the projection booth is our decision-making mind that's either playing. And then the important thing is not even which movie, it's which subscription. It's kind of like we've got two streaming services. We can either stream the ego, or we can stream the Holy Spirit. The funny thing is, in terms of what we see on the screen, it's the same movie, but the subscription is really like the the ticker tape that's the director's cut notes. If you ever watched a movie and you turn on your TV, there's oftentimes a little option for turning off and on the comments from the director, or the production folks, and then they will say, well, this is what I was thinking when I was shooting this scene, and so, but we kind of have the equivalent that's available in our mind all the time. The normal default is we listen to egos blather about, well, this means you should be upset about this, oh, you should be elated about that, and yada yada, and it goes on, and that you know closed caption, if you will, is pretty comical when we look at it. from the Holy Spirit's perspective, because it's basically telling us you're at the mercy of everything that's happening on that screen. The Holy Spirit's rebuttal, the correction is, well, you can look at that, and you need to look at that and see what you're doing with your mind. But what if everything that you're projecting really isn't reality? And you can afford to forgive yourself for wanting to project that onto this massive screen we call spacetime. Yeah.
Um, that's a thing I wanted to talk to you about, and
Uh,
I love the way you lead into it so easily, and I can just jump to it.
oh, please. Yeah.
Synchronicities.
Yeah.
All right, synchronicities, ways of showing us beyond the illusion, beyond
Mm-mm.
the dream, beyond the
Mhm.
matrix. Are they little glimpses of um, God's world and not our world?
Well, the synchronicity that I think we're asked to pay attention to is noticing how everything that seems to happen to us can either be an imprisoning thought or a liberating thought. It can be either a prison or a classroom. And and that everything is, I like to use the phrase mathematically perfect. And maybe that's because I have a warm spot for, my mind for geometry and things that don't change. And that was kind of what got me into metaphysics. It's like, what doesn't change? What's stable? What's reliable? What's certain? And to me, geometry is sort of a reflection of that. But the certainty is in noticing the synchronicity, if you will, of everything that seems to be happening. It's like a mathematically perfect undo script that the Holy Spirit has in its director's cut, its closed caption, that says, look at this with me together. And the Course says, together we have the lamp that will dispel the darkness. Meaning, if I look at my ego without condemnation, without trying to fight it, without trying to tear down the dream, but just realize it is a dream and that I'm dreaming. That's the most helpful thing I can do, not only for myself, but everyone that seems to be in my dream. And that's the synchronicity. And everyone who shows up is perfect for my forgiveness classroom. That's the synchronicity. Every specific thing that seems to happen is the perfect synchronicity for me to look at and say, oh, I'm not upset for the reason I think. I could
Right,
see peace instead of this. Yeah.
which is absolutely awesome, and it also kind of sucks because because you really have to accept it all. You have to
Yeah, well,
say,
yeah, yeah. We don't have to accept the ego's interpretation of
right.
it all. That's the way out of hell, right? That's our get out of jail free card. Yeah.
So, in your personal life, when did you start looking? And I'm going to guess it was before the course when you started looking and thinking, uh, this is not it. This is not reality.
Yeah, I guess I was fortunate in adolescence, and even before that a little bit, is I just kind of like I looked around. It's like something's a little goofy with this world, and it wasn't like I was a total outcast or anything. I mean, I did have, some quirkiness in grade school and high school, as far as not really wanting to go along with the norms in every respect. But there was a part of my mind that was always kind of like, well, what's stable here? What works? What can I really trust? And I guess that's why I was drawn to the metaphysical ideas of something that was beyond appearances, beyond form. And
When did it click? When you knew, like, without a shadow of a doubt, um, that this isn't the real
uh,
world, but there is one.
probably sometime within the next 2 to 3 lifetimes. I don't know. When you're speaking as a past event, I think of it still a work in progress. Yeah, yeah,
Right, right.
yeah. And it is a process, I think, to notice what we're doing with our thoughts and see, um, not drive ourselves crazy. I think to just notice a little bit more every day, when we've gone into the ego no man's land of wanting to blame everyone and everything for what seems to be amiss, and realizing, I need to take responsibility for that, not for the specific things that seem to be out there, but for my thoughts about them. That I
Right.
can do something about. Yeah.
I often mention that uh, when people like to talk a lot about the metaphysics of the course,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
that if someone gave me a foolproof mathematical equation that every single metaphysics of the course was wrong,
Uh-huh.
I would be okay because just that practice of forgiveness brings me so much peace
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah,
that alone is enough.
right,
None of it has to be true,
right.
except that I feel better when I practice.
And that's the pragmatic value of the course, which is really the ultimately practical reality that if I'm feeling peaceful, that really handles everything else. When I'm truly above the battleground, or go vertical instead of trying to fix all the little things in the horizontal projected world, um, that really is a huge thing. The course has a wonderful little uh, phrase that says, "A tranquil mind is not a little gift." That
It's
that
true.
is a, that is that's the real big deal, you know.
It is.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
and I think it's often overlooked because the metaphysics are fascinating.
yeah, yeah,
And I love thinking about. I loved in your subtitle uh, of your book
yeah,
about awakening from the dream
yeah.
and using all the stuff that we've talked about so far,
Uh-huh,
as tools to awaken from the dream. But
uh-huh.
ultimately, like you said, that pragmatic forgiveness, feeling better, is you can't even put a price on it. The value is just
Yeah, yeah,
so great.
yeah. And knowing that we're choosing how we want to feel and think at every moment, that's really empowering. I mean, it's also sobering because when we realize how much we are mindlessly, you know, uh, really in an undisciplined manner, just choosing to do masochistic things with our mind that don't help anyone else and they don't help us when we're wanting to blame and wanting to project what we don't like with the interior of the ego mind onto the world. um, but just if I can look at that without running, metaphorically screaming from the room of my mind, and just say, just a little bit more often, and just say, well, that's pretty crazy. Why would I want to do that to myself?
Right.
And then have that be my contribution to the world. Well, it's like, yeah, that's not a very helpful gift. Yeah.
A very big thing for me was um, when the course says that all we know is our interpretation of the world.
That's a huge word. I love the word interpretation because that basically gives us a way to take the neutral data from what comes at our senses, seemingly from the outside. I mean, even modern physics began to question that a few decades ago with the double slit experiment, when they realized that if you're expecting a photon, you get a photon. If you're expecting a wave, you get a wave, So they could no longer take mind out of the equation. But most of them kind of scratched their heads, and a few of them became mystics, because of that, when they really pondered what the implications were. But now we're using the technology that was birthed from the quantum era right now to have this conversation on these devices.
Right.
But we forget that one of the things that was unearthed from that era was the idea that mind is no longer something that just can be conveniently ignored. And so if mind is primary, then that means we get to choose what we do with our mind. And I think the brilliance of and the profundity of the metaphysics of the course, particularly, I've been helped by, and we mentioned a few minutes ago, Kenneth Wapnick of the Foundation for
Yes.
A Course in Miracles. His work is profound, prolific, and prodigious, and and really, I highly couldn't recommend it more highly. With a close second being Gary Renard's work, which is also fun, and I think complements Ken's work very nicely. And there's plenty of other good course teachers out, but that's kind of my main focus because I with the course and those help um, sources, I don't think you can go wrong. Yeah.
Agreed.
So
Does
yeah.
it seem to you, someone who is scientifically minded, that uh, scientists, physicists have almost turned their back on those early mystical? Uh,
I think some of them have, but there are some that uh, even though maybe they don't put it in their journals for peer review, but maybe privately would say, well, yeah, I kind of had these mystical experiences where I realized that what physics was telling me, and at least it takes you to the threshold of some of the ideas that suggest that we're not seeing the universe as it is. We're seeing it as we are. As I think,
right.
was it Anais Nin who said that? And and also some other famous person I think said uttered basically the same thing. Yeah, yeah,
It keeps coming back to that interpretation.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
and that has great metaphysical um, insights, but as well it has great personal
Yes,
insights
yes,
because
yes.
it's so easy to um, forgive these misunderstandings when I realize they are seeing their interpretation of the world. They're not seeing my interpretation of the world.
Right, right,
So we don't have to keep comparing the two.
right, right. Yeah, that's really helpful. And in parallel to that, I think in complementing that is the notion that the data that's coming in through my senses, the photons that are hitting my retinas and the sound waves hitting my eardrums, just like you and I and everyone else, the data that comes in is completely neutral. There's no intrinsic bias payload coming in on those waves, so to speak. But because the interpretation machine of the ego says, "Oh, I like this sensory package or whatever, this sight that I'm seeing when I scan across the room." Those early workbook lessons are so profound because they say, just don't linger on any one thing because it's all neutral. It's like
Right.
we want to divide and compartmentalize all kinds of things, and it's we've taught ourselves to do that to the nth degree. But what if it's just one thing? And it's really the crucial factor is, am I looking at it with the idea of wanting to see the sameness and forgive the differences, or do I want to make everything embattled by everything else? And of course, that's the ego default, is
Right. Exactly.
to look for a fight and find it.
Um, so the one thing I wanted to touch upon, and we started, and I inadvertently veered away, were the seven hermetic principles.
Oh yes, yes,
And
yes.
anything else you want to throw in as far as sacred geometry? Um,
Oh, I think two of the things that have really stuck with me is the golden ratio and the Vesica Pisces as being really interesting symbols. There's plenty of others like fractals where you can take something like the root structure of a tree or the branches of a tree, above and below, and you can say, well, the trunk, is really where it all comes together, right? And that's we can either use our minds to fragment and further divide, which is the ego strategy, or the Holy Spirit is sort of like watching the tree growing backwards and back to the seed of the oneness, that in a sense we never really left that oneness. Um, and that's what the metaphysics of the Course would suggest, and probably any other non-dual teaching really. That it's that unity that is our true nature, and that's the only thing where there's any true solace, peace, stability, comfort. Um, so in terms of the seven hermetic laws, the first one is mentalism, and you could actually, if you only got that one, that would probably be sufficient, and that's basically everything is mental. And I use that extensively when I pick up the Course or any other non-dual teaching. And if in reading A Course in Miracles, I find that when I pick up that book or read it online, as I do frequently, um, if I can remember that it's always and only about the mind, it's not about the form, it's not about the dream figure I call Bruce, or the one you'd call Eric, but it's about that decision making part of our mind that's constantly choosing between ego and Holy Spirit. And that's where it makes all the difference. So that mentalism principle, combined with the Course's non-dual metaphysics, suddenly it's like, wow, I've got another key that I can use to unlock the secrets of what I've done with my mind. The second law is correspondence, which I think corresponds, pun intended, beautifully to the idea that everything that seems to be outside corresponds to a choice in my mind, and everything that seems to be external is really internal, because it's my interpretation again. But I can use ego's interpretation, which is always a divisive, conflicted one, or I can use Holy Spirit's correction, if that interpretation or translation, if you will, um, preserves the real meaning by changing the form instead of changing the form, changing the meaning to preserve the form. if that makes sense. And then the other laws are vibration, which means that everything vibrates, everything has a frequency. And in a sense, that you could think of the Holy Spirit as being the set of frequencies that undo our wanting to divide, conquer, and keep battles happening. And uh, the ego wants to foment further conflicts, right? And its set of frequencies are always disruptive. Uh, the next of the seven laws is polarity, and of course, uh, again, Holy Spirit would aka our right mind would undo the polarizations by seeing that we're really intrinsically all the same in truth, although not in vulgar form.
That
And
ties
and
up very nicely with forgiveness, polarity.
exactly, yeah. And forgiveness is such an important point, but because when we forgive, what we're really doing is we're depolarizing or correcting the things that we believe we've split apart, which, like I say, ancient mystics as well as modern physicists are really saying it's really just one thing, Yeah. And then we've got rhythm, cause and effect, and gender or generation, the three remaining laws of the Hermetic laws. Rhythm is like there's cycles to everything. So we Ken Wapnick points out that the course is written kind of like a great classical music masterpiece where themes are developed and then set aside and then they come back again. And I think we need those rhythms to look at things and then rest from it and then come back to it, and things come in cycles until we begin to integrate, kind of like the whole seasons, all the seasons of things. Cause and effect is obviously very course like, because it that principle suggests that dealing with effects is fine, but it doesn't really get you anywhere, in the same way that um, you know going to the screen of a movie theater and painting over it is not, um, that's dealing with the effect, but if I go to the projection booth, I'm dealing with the cause. Or if I'm planting something in a garden, it's my choice of seeds that's the cause, and not trying to. And if I want to uproot a weed, I need to pull it out by the roots rather than keep trimming off the newest growth, and
Right.
wondering why it keeps growing back. Yeah. And then the last one is gender generation, and basically just things generate according to their kind. And um, in a book called The Kabbalion, which came out in 1912, 100 years before my second book came out. I timed it so that it would
Very
be
nice.
a
Very nice timing.
100-year anniversary when I did that a few years ago. Um, the idea of gender generation is that things, you plant an acorn, you get an oak tree. You plant a apricot, you get an apricot tree. That kind of thing. So it just, but again, the simplification of that I think the course provides is you plant an ego thought and you get an ego result. You plant a forgiving Holy Spirit corrective thought, and you get peace. Basically.
I often mention how a 365 lessons and a 700 plus page text is
Yeah.
actually incredibly simple
Yeah. Yeah.
in the actual practice of it.
Right. It really is. Yeah. 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 It's simple, but not necessarily easy.
Right.
I think that's a distinction that's sometimes made, and I think a helpful one, because it would be easy if we identified with and accepted the correction that the Holy Spirit part of our mind provides all the time. But we're just kind of in the early stages of that, and the course um, never really refers to us as adults. It basically refers to us everything from infants to little children, which is a good thing, because that means we got plenty of room to grow, and we can afford to be patient and gentle with ourselves, which is hugely important, while looking at our mind more and more consistently and frequently.
As well as being patient with others as well.
Exactly, exactly.
They're in the same position we are.
The same boat. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Bruce, you mind answering some questions?
Oh, shoot, please.
I
Yeah.
know we had one from Heart Matters already that we
Okay.
answered, and thank you for answering that early.
Oh,
Um,
sure.
let's see. And I know Sniper guys, you have questions. Our friend Squirrel Sniper had a question. If I can find it, I pinned it. Sniper, if I can't find it, do you mind re-asking? And anyone else, do you have some questions? One of the things Heart Matter just put in here was to forgive someone requires that you feel wrong to begin with.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think that's the clue. That's, I mean, there's a phrase in the course, I must have chosen wrongly because I'm not at peace. And that's, I think, at the heart of the forgiveness practice is recognizing that whenever we're not completely peaceful, which if we're honest with ourselves is quite a lot of the time, maybe, 99 point whatever percent, especially initially, um, that radical honest self-honesty is huge because that basically allows us to see how miserable we've made ourselves. There's another one of Ken Wapnick's many brilliant ideas that I think I find really helpful. His commentary on lesson 182 I listened to over and over for about a year. One thing that stuck with me is he said, the purpose of the course is not to make you miserable, it's to point out how miserable, to show us how miserable we've made ourselves by choosing that egoic thought system of duality and polarization and differences and wanting to fight our real identity and everyone else's real identity, if that helps.
Right.
Yeah.
So the question from Sniper was, if synchronicity acts as a guiding compass, does that imply that certain key events in our lives are non-negotiable plot points planted by the architect, ensuring we stay on our destined path?
That gets into a huge discussion about determinism and that sort of thing. And I this is just my personal opinion, not what the course says necessarily, but I kind of like the multiple universes theory and the idea that there's all kinds of parallel universes happening. And again, they're all within this dream of space and time and duality and form and matter and energy and all that stuff, and bodies, quarks to quasars, if you will. So every time we forgive, and actually made a little diagram of this that thanks to Alex Marchand, whose book had a little graphic that I kind of adapted, and it's like every time we forgive, we're in the true sense of forgiveness, we're basically kind of collapsing a little bit more of the ego thought system and getting closer and closer to the center of what we really are. And so each time we go around, it's the synchronicity and the script. We're kind of changing the script. And the course does actually give us some suggestion that we can save time. We can bypass what might have taken thousands of years, which sort of implies reincarnation. And the course addresses that as well,
Right.
saying that the important thing is what am I doing with my mind right now, not what did I do yesterday or 17 lifetimes ago, if you believe in reincarnation. Right?
Do you?
Oh, do I believe in reincarnation?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Well, yeah, yes and no. I mean, I generally do. Yes. I guess I figure, and I keep coming back to it's like, well, again, the immediacy of the present moment is really not only the only thing that's important for me to focus on, but the only thing I really can think on. Because even when I think about the past or the future, I'm bringing those thoughts into the present moment.
Right.
So it's my thoughts about the past, present, and future that determine how I'm going to experience this moment. Yeah.
Cat Jack says, question, Bruce, when the course speaks of the happy dream,
Uh-huh.
how do you understand that in practical daily life?
Well, again, I think that ties into that subtitle shift that the happy dream is still. I need to keep reminding myself, and I think that as we practice the courses of metaphysics, that the more we recognize that what we're experiencing that seems to be outside is the dream, because it's my interpretation of what the mental map I have of reality, um, which is completely fabricated. And that's why two people in the same room can have very different experiences because they've got different interpretations, different maps. So I think I've strayed off the question a little bit, but which was run the question again.
Um, when the course speaks of the happy dream,
Right.
how do you understand that in practical daily life? And
Yeah.
before you answer that,
Uh,
I love the fact that your answers are um, incorporating a big picture as well as the macro and the micro at the
I
same time.
I think
So I
that's
appreciate that.
I think that's really important and helpful too, because we can have the big picture vision, but if we don't, do the practical things to integrate it and make it real for us, um, and then it's just a nice theory, right?
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
So as
so
far as the happy dream and the happy dreamer, again, I think I have to remember that, and it's a continuous process of retraining our minds that 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 I'm the decision maker, not the dream figure. And I think that's one of the brilliant things that I got from listening to Ken Wapnick's material, at length, and watching his videos and reading his books, and I can't recommend them highly enough. Um, and he keeps saying over and over again, if you want to really make progress with any good metaphysical system, and particularly, of course, miracles, we have to remind ourselves that it's about the mind, and it's particularly about the decision making part of the mind, which is the dreamer. The part of me that wants to dream is the part that needs to be shown that my wanting to dream has not made me happy. But eventually I'll look at that obsession with the dream, and instead of and the happy dream is sort of a byproduct of not wanting to make a big deal about the dream, because then if it doesn't matter, then why not do the things with my mind that would be gentle and kind and helpful, so as not to make a big deal about the dream. And then waking up from the dream is easier. Another favorite course teacher named Tim Wise, who he's one of the uh, hosts of the School for A Course in Miracles, which I attend on a pretty much daily basis. Great classes, and he says that before we go poof, we go peace. Which I don't have to worry about waking up and disappearing, um, but if I keep practicing forgiveness, I won't be concerned about the dream, because I will have gradually transitioned my identity from matter to content, from form to essence, and our essence is eternal, but the form is pretty finite and fleeting in the cosmic scheme of things. Yeah.
do you think we shouldn't emphasize so much creating the happier dream and just ultimately concentrate on that the happy dream is a byproduct of our practice of forgiveness?
Yeah, and it isn't always necessarily, just suddenly we have, Hallmark movie, Disney type of lives. I mean, in fact, that's probably not too typical. What shifts, I think, is the classroom shifts. So whatever we have unresolved in our mind becomes the next thing that comes up on our radar, so to speak, of things that I need to forgive. So if I forgive one kind of archetype, if you will, of things in my life, then whatever's next in the reversal process of undoing the ego dream, um, comes into view. That's kind of how I
Uh,
look at it. Yeah.
Gary Renard mentioned that in his third book
Yeah.
when he talked about forgiving his parents, forgiving his bandmates, and
Right.
he
Right.
thought he was done,
Yeah.
and he
Yeah.
found out that as he did forgive,
Yeah.
more memories came up, and
Exactly.
he had to keep going back and forgiving. Um,
Perfect
with,
example. Yeah.
and all of it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not a it's not a one and done. Wipe your hands off.
No, in any worthwhile endeavor, it requires persistence and patience and gentleness and practice. Yeah, and it's not a weekend workshop. It's not just like, oh, I took the course. Yeah, I I occasionally will mention some dear friends of mine were visiting my mother's house in Northern California a few years ago. And they asked what I was up to. And I said, well, I'm still studying A Course in Miracles. And one of them said, oh, I did the course one year. And I thought, okay. that's good. I didn't say anything, but I was like,
Right.
well, it might merit a little bit more study and practice than just a year. I think it's really a lifetime process. Yeah,
I agree.
yeah.
Um, so Sniper asks another question: is the ability to perceive synchronicity directly proportional to the degree of integration between one's conscious and unconscious parts?
Um, if by synchronicity you mean, noticing what you're doing with your mind and realizing that every moment is a perfect opportunity to forgive what you're projecting, um, I think that's. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I think that gives us the optimal opportunity to integrate and to bring back together the things that we think are disparate and separate. Does that help? I don't think of synchronicities as a primary, um, at least like in terms of the jargon I usually use as a primary focus typically, but I thinking about it a little bit, it is synchronistic that everything that seems to cross our path is seen properly a perfect forgiveness classroom.
Um, Adam wants to know uh, your thoughts on: did we invent the language of math or found it, discover it?
Um, well, we've invented the whole world, so math would be
Yeah,
included.
there you go.
In fact, there's an early workbook lesson that says, "I've invented the world I see." I mean, so it's actually a lot more far-reaching than we usually want to admit. And and at first it's like, well, that's kind of staggering, but if that's true, then that also means I can uninvent all the things that seem to upset me. Another metaphor that recently I found helpful is that it's like we're a master electrician, and if you think of the people in the world that inhabit this planet, of which there are over 8 billion, it's like we've got 8 billion push buttons that we've wired, not consciously but unconsciously, so that when somebody pushes my buttons, they're my buttons. And it's again back to your wonderful word interpretation, Eric. When I find my buttons have been pushed, I have to remember that, well, they're my buttons, and someone may be pushing my buttons and not even aware that they're doing it. So it's not, the ball's not in their court, it's in my court to see what am I doing with that information, that data, that
I'm
neutral data that ego is going to want to take and run with it and say, well, this is grounds for war. And Holy Spirit will say, no, that's a perfect opportunity to reconcile what you've made into a polarity and find grounds for peace. Yeah.
I mention that quite often
Yeah.
that I would absolutely love to create a place, a safe place on social media where
Uh,
we could all gather and not a single button is ever pushed. I've never been able to figure out a way to do that, but I'd love bringing up guests like you who can help people realize that they can uh, they can make themselves on unbutton pressable.
well, it's not that our buttons don't get pressed. It's just that we I think begin to notice more and more frequently that I can use those golden opportunities or synchronicities, if you will, to see what I'm doing with my mind and welcome them as opportunities to accept the correction that's always available. The forgiveness correction that says, "Wow, I'm doing this. My interpretation is what's making me feel this way. I'm choosing to feel this way," which was actually something when I was starting to study metaphysics with the growing collection of books in my mom's library as a teenager. This phrase kind of came to my mind. I'm choosing to feel this way, and it's like, oh, yeah, I really am choosing to feel this way. So that's kind of the working title of the fourth book I've got going. Yeah.
Anytime I hear that, um, just another opportunity. Uh, and I've been hearing it for the 30 plus years of practicing the course. It
Yeah.
never fails to leave me with this great sense of just relax, relax,
Yeah.
relax.
Yeah.
I get to forgive. I get
Yeah.
to, I don't have to. And I still, as you mentioned before, 30 plus years, my buttons still get pushed. I
Yeah.
still get agitated, still get this,
Yeah.
but I have an invaluable tool
Yeah.
right here, right now
Yes.
that I can turn to.
Yes.
I can ask for that miracle. We're supposed to do miracles every day.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah,
Um,
and that's a hugely important idea, and it kind of ties into the idea that a tranquil mind is not a little gift. And every time that we exercise that happy responsibility for choosing where we send that neutral data, whether we send it to the ego's misinformation campaign headquarters that says, okay, let's fund another war in our mind, or we can send it to Holy Spirit's correction and say, oh, this is what you did with your mind, but you don't have to keep, you know, fomenting conflict. You can see that that is a feedback from a conflicted thought system, but you don't have to reinforce it. You can choose to forgive yourself for wanting to be separate, and that's huge. It's not an easy process, but it's a simple one, as you pointed out earlier. Yeah.
um,
There's another metaphor, if I before I forget it, that I find really fun and helpful, is that to be happily clueless, I think is really a good thing. And to know how little we really, not only do we not know anything about anyone else ultimately, but we don't even know our own minds for the most part, which is why we need the feedback from the world to tell us what we're doing with our minds. But one of the metaphors I like is imagine myself as like an amoeba that's crawling on the underside of a leaf, on the dark side of a leaf that is at the bottom of a very dark, murky pond. And then when I crawl right to the edge of the leaf, I see a little glimmer of light. It's still pretty dim, but it's quite a bit brighter than on the underside of the leaf. And at that moment, as an amoeba, I say, I understand the cosmos. And and I think that's what we do for the
right.
most part when we get a few little aha moments. And it's important to generalize them because I think that really does get us closer to the light. But to assume that we understand the big picture, I figure we're a ways off.
As a yogi, I like to teach
Yeah.
what I consider to be the greatest mudra, the greatest gesture of all times,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is shrug my shoulders,
Oh,
hands
yeah.
up in the air.
Yeah. Exactly. That's
Don't
great.
know.
That's great. I love it. Love it. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Samantha wants to know: Does Bruce know of geomancy?
I know of it, yes, and I have several friends and colleagues that do that, and it hasn't been something I'm particularly drawn to, but one friend, Richard Feather Anderson, I know has done a lot with that, and several other people that I don't haven't really spent a lot of time connecting with lately, but in years past I've had a circle of acquaintances that have done work with that. Yeah.
So I think we have uh, one more question. If
Okay.
anyone has one more after this, and then we'll wrap it up. I don't want to
O-
take all of your time.
Okay.
Um,
Oh,
the question:
no, no
if
hurry.
the constant stream of sensory input is the surface interface of the material world,
Uh-huh.
what exactly are the what exactly are we accessing when we achieve deep meditative stillness?
Well, I think the stillness really comes from choosing the correction of the Holy Spirit, which says that nothing happened, meaning that the entire material world was made as an attempt to escape from an idea that we believed in separation. And this is one of the more challenging ideas in the Course in Miracles, is that we think that we pulled off this impossible crime, and we've labeled it, maybe for the most part unconsciously, as such. But that corrective principle in our mind that we call Holy Spirit, or any ego-free presence, basically says, "Get out of my courtroom. Case dismissed. No one's guilty here. No one did this separation thing, this duality thing. We just dreamt we did." And our minds are so powerful that we can believe that we split our minds apart into countless fragments. Um, but what if that's just a dream? And then, in order to escape from that horrible and horrifying dream, we thought, well, let's make up a world where we can blame everything on something external, including our own bodies, as well as 8 billion and counting humans just on this planet alone that are convenient scapegoats for our mental goatscape, if you will. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, did I hear you mention a fourth book coming up?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the preliminary stages. The third one that's out now is actually a purely digital book. It's a glossary for A Course in Miracles. So if you go to glossary.acimblog.com, I made a little glossary to complement the wonderful one that Ken Wapnick did, and it's really intended just as a complement, not to necessarily be standalone without Ken's work. But what it does that Ken's didn't do, because he wrote it before the web edition of the course was available, is it's heavily cross-linked to the web edition of the course. So if, for example, I'll share one of the humorous entries, which is zombie apocalypse. That's the last. I wanted to have something for every letter of the alphabet. So there's no zombies in the course, but apocalypse was there, so I put that in there. And then right before that is the entry for Y is you. There's like 11,000 instances of the word you in the course, which means that it's really addressing the decision-making part of our minds. It's choosing between those two thought systems. And that's the predominant emphasis of that wonderful metaphysical masterpiece, is just keep looking at our minds, look at our minds with gentleness, with patience, with perseverance, and notice when we're not at peace, and just say, oh, if I'm not at peace, I must have chosen wrongly. Yeah.
The emphasis of the decision maker part of the
Uh-huh.
mind
Uh-huh.
was the emphasis was relatively new for me when I started diving in more to Kenneth Wapnick's work.
Yes,
I
yes.
I had missed that for a long time.
Me too.
Uh,
Me too.
could you uh, emphasize that a little bit? How we have the Holy Spirit, we have the ego, but we have the decision maker that gets to
Exactly.
choose between us.
Exactly. And that we're doing that constantly. So, and Ken points that out as a way to also demonstrate that the great equalizing principle of forgiveness, and what the Course calls atonement or correction or resurrection, salvation, a lot of different synonyms for the undoing process, is really just looking at the ego with the Holy Spirit without condemnation. And but those are the three parts of our mind. Is really, we have the insane part of our mind we call ego, the sane part of our mind we call Holy Spirit, and the part that's constantly choosing between those two. A lot of times it seems to be stuck in ego position for a considerable part of each day. But with training, with practice, and with the motivation, by looking at how miserable we have made ourselves by choosing the ego, we will want to voluntarily choose the Holy Spirit more frequently, and that's ultimately our way out of our way out of hell, way out of the quagmire of ego's duality.
Um, Again, it just emphasizes so much how important Kenneth Wapnick was to the
Oh,
course. To
hugely helpful. Yeah, yeah. And if you read nothing but Ken's work on the course, you would find not only many years of insights, very prolific. I mean, dozens of books. The three series that he's done that I think for people who've read through the course, especially once or twice or more times, and are looking for something deeper. The three books of Ken's that I would recommend are The Journey Through the Text, which is a 4-volume set. The Journey Through the Workbook, which is actually 8 volumes, but the last one is an index, so there's really 7 volumes, and then a single volume for The Journey Through the Manual. The first and the third in those two series are line by line, explanations of what's in the course. The Journey Through the Text, which is 4 volumes, is basically, he kind of pulls out themes from each chapter in the text. So it's not a line by line, but he covers the material very thoroughly, and they're just brilliant. I think they're like his magna cum laude work on the course, and highly recommended. And all of his books are great. I mean, you can't go wrong with any. The only one that I probably not encourage people to read initially, unless you are like a biblical and religious scholar, would be Love Does Not Condemn, and it's about Platonism and Christianity and Gnosticism and the Course. And he describes the antecedents and the historical background and foundations upon which the Course was built, and the profound uh, synchronicities, if you will, or overlaps between some of those traditions that many people don't realize, as well as the profound differences between some of those philosophies and approaches. Yeah.
You've mentioned the manual for teachers several times.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if it will surprise you or not surprise you that I'd finished through the course several times without approaching the manual for teachers.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
seemed presumptuous of me to step into that.
That's a really good point. And I'll let you finish with that?
I'll add on one thing, but go ahead and put that in.
Oh, okay. Well, what I was going to say in response to that was, early in the manual it says we're always teaching, and this was also echoed generously in Ken's work as well, is that we're always teaching all the time. We're teaching and learning all the time. So it's not like there's some special class of human that is designated teacher or designated student. We're all students and we're all teachers. We're all teaching and learning either the ego or the Holy Spirit all the time. So it's really that simple. So it's not like it's a big deal. And another place that's reflected is in the psychotherapy pamphlet, which is one of the two supplements that's included in the more recent versions. And it basically says, this is geared toward psychotherapy, but it really can be generalized to any relationship, which I think is
Right.
kind of still the same point. Yes. And I wanted to hear your other thought on that.
So I thought it was presumptuous, but
Yeah.
now I think there was a large amount of fear with the trust aspect because
Ah,
I keep coming back to
yes.
ouch,
Yes.
ouch, ouch. And it hurts.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
whole trusting, as the course talks about trusting,
Yeah.
uh, is ultimately the entirety of A Course in Miracles. It's trusting the Holy Spirit and
Yes.
not the ego.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I thought that I was, making these huge strides, and all of a sudden I get to that point of trust, and again, my ego is shouting, "Ouch! This hurts." How much more? Because it paints a pretty, very vividly. Uh, it feels like you're losing a whole lot, but ultimately, because it's teaching you, you're not losing anything at all.
Bingo. Brilliant. Brilliant. Yeah. And that's such an important point that you bring up, Eric. It's just because we're really I mean, this is the way I like to explain it, is the ego, which is nothing, has attempted to make something out of nothing. And that's the ego persona and our individual identities, which, because that's such a horrific thought at its core, because it's based on the death of oneness, or the murder of perfect oneness, if you will, or God, that it had to do to get out of that insanity, had to project onto a world of duality, which we call space, time, matter, energy, and all that. Um, so it the solution is that we can look at the insanity without condemnation, and when we do that, um, we're undoing the duality. You said something that I think I wandered off a little bit from your comment. So if you would, if
Um,
wouldn't mind repeating.
I think the thing that I repeated more than anything was "ouch, ouch, ouch."
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah,
As
yeah.
each
Right, right.
carpet being pulled out,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
think
yeah.
because it puts it in layers or in
Right,
levels,
right.
and you think, okay, well, I'm at this level, but of course, you know, there's really no levels. But you think, okay, I'm at this level. Um, I only got three more ouches to go before everything's better.
Yeah, yeah.
But it doesn't work that way.
Right.
Um, in a perfect um, in a perfect world of the decision maker, I would decide to trust once, and I'd be there.
Right. Right. Yeah, exactly. And that development of trust is huge. And there's a section in the manual on that has got a lot in it. The fifth stage is the stage where, we realize, it's all about looking at our values and what we think is valuable, which really addresses what you were just talking about. Is we think that we have to give up something, that the whole notion of sacrifice is completely foreign and antithetical to the Holy Spirit, which is to say, getting back to that earlier thought, is I took the thought of nothing, which is what the ego is. It's really it's a non-thought, not non-thought in the sense of it's not real anyway. It's not eternal, and tried to make it into something. Realized that it wasn't successful in making something valuable, and then had to do a massive cover up on an ongoing basis and keep changing the landscape and making moving targets to try to fix it. So we took nothing, tried to make something out of it, but what we've denied is everything that we really are. So the whole notion of sacrifice is bogus, because we're really asked to sacrifice the idea of sacrifice, which is the idea of separation, which is the thought system of the ego. So
And that
we're really not giving up anything, but we haven't quite convinced ourselves that that's the case, because we still think there's value in the world, and we don't quite buy the idea that the world is happening in our head, in our minds.
and that the world is going to provide me uh, the ultimate things that I need.
Right,
And
right,
I keep
right,
putting my trust that instead of putting my trust on the source in in the first 50, God is my source.
right, right.
Um,
Yes.
and there's a lot of value in going back to those first 50 lessons that
Oh,
I always
they're
say
profound. They're wonderful. Yes. Yeah.
it's almost like, steps of negation. It's
Yeah.
showing you, it's purposely taking stuff away
Yeah.
so that you see what you actually have. It's taken away illusion.
And it's not asking us to sacrifice anything material. I think that's a common misconception that is in the category of what the course calls level of confusion. The course doesn't ask us to give up the world. It asks us to give up the ego's interpretation of the world. Huge difference. It doesn't mean that sometimes we're not, we don't realize, well, gee, this hobby I had was actually, harmful, or at least not making me happy. Uh, but you know it doesn't there's no sacrifice that's being asked. We're asked to give up the idea of sacrifice, which is the idea of being a separate self. And once we give that up, then it becomes immaterial what happens or doesn't happen. And I think there's very, very few people who are there to that place in their mind. um,
Right.
Krishnamurti was asked once what was the secret, of his
Yeah.
happiness, and he said, I don't mind what happens. So I think that's pretty
Very,
aligned with the course. Yeah.
very profound. It is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
Because if you don't mind what happens, then the whole idea of sacrifice really is like, well, it's kind of a silly notion, isn't it? Because if peace is intrinsic to our real identity, and we've identified with that reality, and it's stable, and there's nothing that can touch it, then we're home. Right at the beginning of the course, I think when I first flipped through the course back in the 70s and in early 80s, the religious terms put me off. But then when I finally went back, moving to the foothills, and started reading it from the beginning, I read, nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. So then nothing real can be threatened is our real identity, and it's the identity that we all share. And that was
right.
one of the things that, since you mentioned the manual, that Ken in his journey through the manual points out right at the beginning of his commentary on the manual. He says there's two themes in the manual: trusting the Holy Spirit. Thank you again for bringing that up, because that's crucial. And shared identity and shared interest. And they're really flip sides of the same coin, aren't they? I mean, because when we really trust that inner guidance that says, we're all in it together, then that's the shared interest, and that's the foundation for true compassion. And the true compassion uh, reminds ourselves and each other that we're not limited by the form, by appearances. You know.
I think that's a good way for us to wrap things up.
Well,
We're
thank
not
you.
limited,
Yeah.
not limited by form.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Um, I've read
Thank you
a
so much, Eric. I really
Thank
enjoyed this
you.
conversation. Yeah.
I've read a great quote by uh, Kenneth Wapnick today,
Yeah.
uh, where it very humorously said, "And don't forget to be normal."
Yes. Yes.
um,
Yes. Yeah.
which because you painted a great practical and metaphysical approach to life and the course. Um, and a lot of when you use that Krishnamurti quote, I remember when I first read that in my 20s, and I immediately declared, I'm not going to take anything personally. I'm going to not mind whatever happens. And of course, within minutes, I was already getting pissed off about something or another.
Sure. Sure. Sure.
Um,
Yeah. That's the standard ego backlash, right? Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the thing. Don't forget to be normal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Enjoy life and know
Yes.
that you're going to make mistakes and
Yeah.
you're not going to be a perfect course student,
Right.
but you're a course student nonetheless.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a lot of people that are may not be practicing the form of the course, but we're all on the same trajectory. And I think that shared interest idea is that, everyone sooner or later will voluntarily, not necessarily, pick up a copy of A Course in Miracles, but will realize I'm doing this to myself. That's the secret of salvation. I'm doing this with my mind. And if I'm not peaceful, it's because I've just chosen a pattern of thinking that isn't working for me, and that I can choose against that. Like, I don't have to fight it, but I just have to look at it and not condemn those thoughts. Yeah,
That's so important.
yeah,
We're not at battle with the ego. We don't have to suit
exactly.
up and go to
Yeah,
war. We're not trying to destroy it.
yeah, yeah. It kind of defeats the purpose, isn't it? When you suit up.
So Kat says, thank you, Mr. Rawls.
Oh, thank you.
And Sniper says, this just finished off a great week. Thank you, Bruce and Eric.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
Um, and Long John says, working that core as a core student, working the course as a core student.
Yay. Yay.
So thank you so much.
Oh,
Would you consider coming back up, hanging out with us sometime?
absolutely, absolutely. I'd love to. Yeah, yeah.
So we're going to sign off. I
Okay.
appreciate it very much.
Likewise, so much, very much. Yes. Thanks,
All right.
Eric.
Take care.
Have a-
Take care,
have a-
guys. I will see you tomorrow.
Great.